Circle graphs. So circle graphs is a graph that is in a circular form. It's also called percent graphs, percent circle graph. So many ways to call it. So it is used to see different parts very quickly out of 100%. For example, first thing we need to do is a survey. A survey is when you go ask people about their opinion about something. For example, if the question is, what is your favorite type of car? And 5 people chose Ford Mustang, 3 people chose Chevrolet Camaro, 1 person chose Audi, 9 people chose Dodge Charger, and last but not least, 2 people selected the BMW. So let's start with the first one. Fraction. If you total it up, there are 20 people they surveyed. 5 out of 20 persons selected Ford Mustang. Let's turn this to a percent. What does a percent mean again? Cent means 100. Out of 100. So how do you turn 20 to 100? You multiply by 5. That's 25 hundredths, 25%, or 0 and 25 hundredths. This is the fraction, decimal, percent equivalence. Next one. 3 people chose Chevrolet Camaro out of 20 people. Let's turn it to a fraction, decimal, percent, times 5, 15 hundredths, 15%, 0, and 15 hundredths. Our next one, 1 person out of 20 chose Audi. If you do out of 100 times 5, 5 hundredths, 5%. Ooh, how do you write that as a decimal? 0 and, what's this? That's 50. Oh, 0 and 0.5 hundredths. 5 hundredths is written as 0 decimal point 0.5. Next one, 9 out of 20 people selected the Dodge Charger. Out of 100, that's 45%. 45 hundredths, 45%, 0 and 45. Last but not least, 2 out of 20 selected BMW. To turn it to 100, you multiply by 5. That's 10 hundredths, 10%, or 0 and 10 hundredths. So the first thing you need to do to make a circle graph is you need to make a circle. Kind of obvious, isn't it? So let's make a circle. In a circle graph, or a percent graph, it adds up to 100%. So the first thing I tell kids to do is draw a dot in the center. Find the center of your circle. Then draw a radius from the center of the circle to the top edge. Is that radius? I've heard that word before. Well, maybe you've heard it in 5th grade. Radius is a line segment from the center of a circle to the edge. Half of a diameter, which is the full line. So label it 0%. There are major benchmarks. If you color half of this circle, that's 50%. What's between 0 and 50%? 25%. What's on the opposite side? 75%. And if you color the whole thing, 100%. So let's look at our first one, Ford Mustang. 25% or 25 hundredths or 0 and 25 hundredths selected Ford Mustang. Before we do that, there are 25. I think we should label it even more. Let's break it down to more sections. Do you want to break it down by 1%? No, I'm not going to number it from 0 to 100. 10? No, then you'll skip 25%. Let's number it by 5. Let's do multiples of 5. To do that, draw 4 lines between 0 and 25 and label it 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. Draw 4 more lines between 25 to 50%, 30%, 35%, 40%, 45%. Draw 4 more lines between 50 and 75%. You have 55%, 60%, 65%, 70%. Draw 4 more lines. You have 80%, 85%, 90%, 95%. Now let's start with Ford Mustang. So 25% of this graph, or 25 hundredths of this graph, is Ford Mustang. So here's 25%. Let's label it Ford Mustang 25%. In Chevrolet Camaro, we have 15% who selected the Chevrolet Camaro. So 15% or 15 out of 100 are Chevrolet Camaro. This section, this is 50%, but it's being used for Ford. So where should I label 15%? Well, I could take any 15%. Well, if this is 25, let's count. 5, 10, 15. So this part must be the Chevrolet Camaro, 15%. So what's 15% more of 25%? 40%. So 25%, 15%. So I counted by 5. Next one, 5% of this graph is the Audi. Some kids will label it right here, but it's being used for 4. So what's 5 more? Must be this one. 5 more is Audi, 5%. So it's at from 40, 5 more is 45. 45% of this graph is Dodge Charger, 45 more. Well, it's being used. So 45% looks like this. So we need to draw this in this section. So 45 more. So let's count. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. Oh, should I just done 45? You're asked, stop at 35. What's 45 more? That 90. So much faster. So 45% is Dodge Charger. They are nice cars. God, that's almost a little less than half of the graph. And last but not least, BMW are the last 10%. So as you can tell, Dodge is 45% of the graph. Chevrolet and BMW, if you put them together, it's the same amount as Ford, and Audi is the least. So what happens if, let's take it a step further. What if someone asks you, Chevrolet, 15% like Chevrolet? And you say, yeah. Can you break that down into a fraction? So 15%, remember, percent means out of 100. Can you simplify 15%? Divide by 5, when it ends with 5, divide by 5, 320. So that means if there are 20 people, 3 people chose Chevrolet Camaro. Hey, it is true. 3 people did choose 20. So you can always go backward, all equivalency. So in a circle graph is used to show different parts very quickly in a circle, and you can find a fraction, decimal, percent of it. This is the study of circle graphs.